I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
Princess Anne did not simply miss a royal gala. She refused to walk through its doors. Hours before senior family members were expected to gather, the Princess Royal delivered a decision that stunned palace staff and forced King Charles to confront a conflict no one wanted made public. Anne's absence was deliberate, personal, and tied directly to a protocol breach involving Queen Camilla that had crossed a line she would no longer ignore. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The decision landed hard because this was no ordinary dinner. The royal gala was a formal engagement, designed to show unity among senior working royals, meaning family members who carry out official duties for the crown. Every entrance, position, and acknowledgement carried a message about order. Anne understood that. Charles understood it too. That was why the final ceremonial briefing suddenly felt dangerous. Anne opened the folder containing the seating plan and ceremonial order, the official sequence governing where senior royals stand, enter, and are formally recognized. She read the revised placement twice. The change pushed her position back and altered when she would be acknowledged. Anne closed the folder, looked across the room, and said, "Then I will not be there." Her secretary understood immediately. This was not hesitation. It was refusal. Charles received the message minutes later and went still. The king had seen his sister endure family crises, brutal headlines, and exhausting schedules without using absence as protest. Her strength had always been consistency. She turned up. That history made this different, because her refusal signaled that she believed a rule protecting the monarchy had been crossed. Charles asked if she could be persuaded. The answer came back quickly, not unless the alteration was addressed. Camilla initially believed the dispute could be contained. The queen consort had understood the revised arrangement as an administrative adjustment, not an insult. But an aide told her Anne had directly linked her withdrawal to a protocol breach authorized during gala preparations. Camilla's confidence hardened into disbelief. She had not expected a ceremonial change to become a test of legitimacy. Yet her decision now stood at the center of the family's most visible absence. Anne's anger carried another layer Charles could not ignore. Days earlier, she had challenged a similar intervention and believed her objection had been understood. Now the same boundary appeared to have been crossed again. Her chair would remain empty that night, but to understand why she was willing to make that absence louder than any speech, the struggle between the women had to be understood first. The conflict was never as simple as Anne versus Camilla. One woman had spent a lifetime serving the crown without demanding applause. The other had endured decades of scrutiny before finally reaching the heart of the monarchy. Both understood sacrifice. Both understood humiliation. Yet inside the palace, experience did not erase hierarchy, and affection did not erase rules. When those rules were tested, their very different relationships with Charles suddenly became impossible to separate from the dispute. Anne understood exactly why the argument mattered. Ceremonial protocol, the established rules controlling royal order, precedence, entrances, and formal recognition, was never merely about who stood closest to whom. To the Princess Royal, it protected the institution from personal preference. If one household could quietly change the order today, another could do the same tomorrow. Anne had spent decades watching traditions survive, precisely because individuals were expected to submit themselves to something larger. Camilla saw the same situation through a very different wound. The Queen had spent years fighting to be accepted inside a family and institution that had once treated her presence as deeply controversial. Now she finally occupied a position of authority beside Charles, and being expected to seek approval for every practical adjustment felt painfully close to being told she still did not truly belong. When she learned Anne had challenged the gala arrangement, hurt came before anger. Anne spoke privately to an aide after reading the revised order again. She did not raise her voice. She simply said she could accept being outranked, but she would not accept the rules being rewritten after the invitations were sent. The trusted staff member understood the distinction immediately. This was not a demand for status. The Princess Royal feared that repeated exceptions could slowly become precedent, and precedent inside the monarchy could outlive every person who created it. Camilla later sat with Charles and asked why her decision had been interpreted as disrespect. She believed the alteration had been administrative, designed to make the gala flow more smoothly. The king listened carefully, but his discomfort was impossible to hide. He loved his wife and understood how fiercely she had fought for acceptance. Yet he trusted his sister almost instinctively, because Anne had spent a lifetime protecting the crown without seeking greater power for herself. William quietly entered the problem from another direction. The prince had already noticed changes appearing in ceremonial planning and asked whether the latest alteration had been cleared through the Lord Chamberlain's office, the royal department responsible for coordinating major ceremonial arrangements and official events. His question unsettled Charles, because William was not defending Anne emotionally. He was questioning the process itself. That distinction changed everything. Camilla wanted authority without permanent suspicion. Anne wanted rules strong enough to survive whoever held authority. Charles now stood between two women who both believed they were protecting the monarchy, while William had raised the one question nobody could easily dismiss. What looked like a disagreement over one evening was actually the final crack in a dispute that had begun days earlier, and one private ceremony had pushed Anne past the point of silence. Days before the gala, no one expected a rehearsal to become the moment everyone would later remember. There were no raised voices at first, no dramatic exit, only a revised ceremonial sequence, one quiet objection, and a response that landed harder than anyone intended. Anne had seen changes before. She had accepted compromises before. But this time, as the revised order was explained to her, she realized the argument was no longer about convenience. It was about who had the right to alter royal precedents. Anne arrived at the closed Windsor rehearsal, expecting routine preparation for a smaller reception. Instead, the Princess Royal discovered that her ceremonial entrance had been moved behind a guest delegation, selected through Camilla's household. Royal precedents, the formal order determining who enters, stands, and is acknowledged before whom, was supposed to remove personal preference from exactly this kind of moment. Anne immediately understood why the change mattered. It had been made without consulting her household, and if such adjustments could be introduced casually, future ceremonies could become vulnerable to influence, rather than established order. Anne turned to the coordinating courtier and asked one simple question. Had Charles personally approved it? The answer did not come quickly enough. The hesitation changed her expression before a single explanation followed. The official finally said the alteration had been authorized through the Queen's household as a practical measure to streamline the reception and give visiting dignitaries a cleaner introduction. Anne heard the reasoning, but she also heard what was missing. The king had not clearly signed off on it. Camilla defended the decision later, when the two women spoke privately. The Queen insisted the adjustment had never been designed to diminish Anne, and described it as organizational rather than personal. She wanted the evening to move smoothly, nothing more. Anne listened, but her concern had already moved beyond intention. To her, the danger was authority being exercised first and questioned later. Camilla felt accused of abusing a position she had fought years to occupy, while the Princess Royal felt a safeguard was being treated like an inconvenience. Charles stepped into the dispute before it hardened further. The king asked both women to allow the Windsor reception to proceed without another argument. He wanted calm. Anne wanted a clear ruling. Camilla wanted her judgment trusted. When Charles chose peace over an immediate decision, his sister left believing the principle itself had been postponed, simply because confronting it was uncomfortable. Anne responded afterward with a concise written objection. In the documented note, she requested that future ceremonial changes affecting senior royals receive formal approval before being issued. She did not demand an apology. She demanded a process. Then the gala plan arrived 2 days later. Anne read it once. Then again, another alteration affected her ceremonial position. Her warning had not merely failed to settle the matter. To her, it had been ignored. The second change did what the first could not. It transformed irritation into defiance. And this time, Anne would not send another note. She would confront the Queen herself. Anne did not arrive looking for an apology. She arrived looking for an answer. Behind a closed palace door, with aides dismissed and the gala only hours away, the Princess Royal confronted the Queen over the altered ceremonial order. Camilla refused to retreat. Anne refused to soften the principle at stake. And when Charles entered midway through the exchange, he discovered something far more serious than a family disagreement. Both women believed they were protecting the monarchy. Anne entered Camilla's private sitting room, carrying the revised order. She placed it on the table between them and asked one question: who approved the second alteration? The document controlled the gala's ceremonial sequence, the formal order determining entrances, recognition, and precedence among senior royals, which meant any change carried institutional weight. Camilla did not hide behind an aide. She admitted that her household had authorized it because they believed the adjustment better reflected the hosting structure and her position beside the king. Camilla expected resistance. She did not expect Anne's answer to cut so cleanly. The Princess Royal told her, "This is not about me." She said that if senior precedents could be adjusted casually, then everyone below them could eventually be moved, delayed, or diminished according to personal preference. Anne's anger was controlled, but the principle underneath it was absolute. To her, ceremony protected the monarchy from exactly that kind of uncertainty. Camilla's hurt turned quickly into anger. The Queen had spent years being treated as though she stood outside the institution, and now she felt Anne was demanding that she justify every act of authority even after becoming the sovereign's wife. She insisted the change had not been designed to humiliate anyone. Anne replied that intention was not the point. Rules mattered most when breaking them seemed harmless. Charles entered after being summoned and immediately understood how far the argument had moved. The king asked both women to stop before guests began arriving. He wanted the gala protected from a family dispute. Anne told him she would attend only if the original order was restored. Camilla remained silent for a moment, waiting to see whether her husband would overturn her decision in front of his sister. Charles hesitated. That hesitation was enough. He feared that reversing the change at the last minute would expose the conflict, embarrass his wife, and make the gala itself look unstable. Anne understood what he was choosing, even if he had not said it aloud. Anne stepped back from the table. She told them quietly that if the altered order remained, she would remove herself rather than lend it legitimacy. Camilla realized the threat was no longer theoretical. Charles realized the empty chair was now unavoidable. Anne walked away from the confrontation, but the real decision now belonged to Charles, and whatever he chose would tell both women exactly whose authority mattered most. The king could have ended the matter with a sentence. That was precisely why the room became so quiet. Charles had the authority to restore the original order, support Camilla's revision, or postpone the contested ceremonial sequence entirely. Yet none of those options was neutral. Correcting his wife would wound her publicly. Ignoring his sister would send a message through every royal household. And canceling the arrangement would confirm that the monarchy had reached an internal crisis over something outsiders might dismiss as mere protocol. Charles studied both versions of the gala order alone. Final ceremonial authority rested with the sovereign and the formal offices acting in his name, meaning the king could ultimately decide how the dispute ended. But precedence existed for a reason. It separated official hierarchy from private preference. Charles understood that if affection, marriage, or irritation could change the order too easily, then the system designed to protect stability would become vulnerable to whoever had the strongest influence in the room. Charles picked up his pen and began marking a compromise. He considered keeping part of Camilla's revision while restoring Anne's original place in the sequence. Then he stopped. The king set the pen down and stared at the pages, because the compromise solved nothing. It would leave both women believing the principle remained unsettled, and ambiguity now seemed more dangerous than confrontation. William entered quietly and chose his words with care. The prince told his father that correcting the order might cause immediate embarrassment, but allowing an unauthorized change to stand could create a precedent far beyond one Gala. Charles listened because his son was thinking about the monarchy he would someday inherit. William was not attacking Camilla. He was warning that an institution built on rules could not survive if those rules became optional whenever they were inconvenient. Camilla gave Charles the opposite emotional truth. The Queen told him privately that withdrawing her alteration after Anne's refusal would make it appear that she could be overruled simply through pressure. She had fought too long to earn legitimacy beside him, and being publicly reversed now would reopen old wounds. Charles saw the pain beneath her anger, which made the decision harder, not easier. Then the procedural review arrived. Palace officials confirmed through a documented internal account that the Gala amendment had bypassed one normal stage of review. The intention had not been malicious, but Anne's objection had substance. Charles could no longer dismiss the dispute as wounded pride. Charles made his choice. He would not reverse the entire gala arrangement hours before the event, but he ordered that no future ceremonial change affecting senior precedents could be issued without formal approval across the relevant royal households. The king had drawn a line for the future, but it came too late for that evening, and when the gala began without Anne, the consequences became impossible to hide. The gala went ahead. The music began. Guests arrived. Yet one absence followed the royal party through every carefully timed moment. Anne's place had not simply been left vacant. It had become the most discussed presence in the room. Charles understood it immediately. Camilla did too. What had been contained behind palace doors now existed in the minds of everyone watching, and neither woman could control what the empty space beside the family appeared to say. Charles noticed Anne's unused place before the formal entrance, and paused. The gala order, the official sequence guiding entrances, seating, and recognition, had already been fixed for the evening, so any disruption would now be impossible to hide completely. The king looked toward the empty position, then gave the signal for proceedings to continue. He knew why the absence mattered. Anne almost never withdrew from duty, and every senior guest in the room understood that her missing presence was unlikely to be accidental. Camilla held her composure until a senior guest quietly asked whether the Princess Royal was unwell. The Queen answered carefully, but the question clearly unsettled her. She had wanted the disagreement contained as a private matter of organization. Instead, Anne's refusal had turned that disagreement into something everyone could feel, without knowing the details. Camilla realized that silence had not protected her. It had created a vacuum, and people were already filling it with their own conclusions. Charles refused to invent a convenient explanation. When asked directly, the king said only that Anne would not be attending. He did not mention illness. He did not blame scheduling. That restraint protected the family from a public confrontation, but it also confirmed something important. His sister's absence was deliberate. William watched his father closely and saw him grow quieter as the evening progressed. The prince understood that this was no longer merely a procedural headache. Charles was hurt. Anne, meanwhile, remained away from the gala, but could not detach herself from what was happening. She asked an aide whether the original ceremonial order had ultimately been restored. Her question revealed the contradiction at the center of her refusal. The Princess Royal had rejected the evening, but she had not rejected the institution. She still cared about the rules being followed, even when she was not there to benefit from them. Palace officials began examining earlier alterations authorized through separate royal households before the gala had even ended. Through a documented internal review, they discovered enough irregularities to justify a broader look at how changes were being approved. Camilla learned that Charles had ordered this review during the evening. The message was unmistakable. Anne's protest had already changed palace procedure. The gala ended, but the power struggle had not. By the next morning, one private conversation would decide whether this became a permanent family fracture or something far more unexpected. The next morning, Anne did not meet a committee. She did not meet a courtier. She met her brother. No aides sat between them. No ceremonial order lay open for debate, and no queen's household waited outside for instructions. Charles wanted one answer. Had she intended to humiliate Camilla? Anne's reply changed the direction of the entire dispute. She had not stayed away to weaken the queen, she told him. She had stayed away because she believed attendance would weaken the rules. Charles spoke first, and this time there was no royal language to hide behind. The king told Anne that her absence had placed him in an impossible position and had caused Camilla real pain in front of guests. The gala had been meant to project unity, but instead, every unanswered question seemed to point back toward the family. Anne listened without interrupting. She understood the cost. She also knew why she had accepted it. Anne admitted that her decision had personal consequences. The Princess Royal said she regretted the hurt caused to Charles and the humiliation Camilla had felt, but she would not apologize for refusing to support a procedure she believed had been altered improperly. To her, ceremonial approval, the formal process used to confirm how senior royals are placed and recognized, mattered because it prevented private influence from slowly becoming official practice. Charles did not argue with that. Instead, the monarch acknowledged something harder. He told his sister that he should have acted after the Windsor rehearsal. By trying to avoid confrontation, he had allowed a manageable disagreement to grow into a family crisis. Anne answered just as plainly. She should have gone directly to him earlier, rather than allowing frustration to build until the night of the gala. For the first time, both siblings were admitting that silence had helped create the damage. Anne then made one point completely clear. She had never asked for Camilla to be punished, embarrassed, or stripped of authority. The trusted sister wanted one remedy only: a clear system requiring formal approval when ceremonial changes affected senior royal households. She wanted the same rule to protect the Queen, William herself, and anyone who followed them. Charles agreed. That decision changed the meaning of the entire dispute. What had looked like a personal battle between two women became a reform of palace procedure. Camilla would keep her position. Anne would keep her principle. The institution would gain a clearer boundary. Charles finally asked whether his sister would attend the next major royal engagement. Anne paused, then answered that she would, if the rules were clear. It was not a dramatic reconciliation, but it was enough. That private agreement could repair the machinery of the palace, but outside its gates, the public had already turned one empty chair into a national symbol. By morning, the absence had escaped every palace wall. Britain did not see approval procedures or rehearsal notes. It saw Anne missing from a royal gala after years of almost relentless public duty. That contrast gave the story its force. Commentators debated loyalty. Newspapers questioned Camilla's influence. Supporters defended the Queen. But one specific image dominated the conversation: Anne's unused place among senior members of the family, perfectly prepared and unmistakably empty. The front page made the argument impossible to contain. One major morning newspaper placed the vacant Gala seat at the center, beneath the words, "Anne draws the line." The image turned a private protocol dispute into something the public could instantly understand. Ceremonial safeguards, the formal rules that keep royal rank and official order from being changed through personal preference, suddenly became part of a national conversation. Anne had said nothing publicly, yet her absence now seemed louder than any statement she could have issued. A television broadcaster framed the conflict differently. Rather than presenting it as a simple feud over status, the report described a collision between old safeguards and the authority of a modern queen trying to exercise her role confidently. That distinction mattered. Camilla was no longer being judged only on one altered gala arrangement. She was being judged on whether her position gave her enough freedom to reshape procedure at all. Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered near the gates as debate intensified. Some praised the Princess Royal for defending rules she had spent decades obeying. Others argued that Camilla could never truly function as queen if every decision she made was treated with suspicion. Anne became a symbol of continuity. The queen became a symbol of contested authority. Neither woman had asked for that public role, but both were now trapped inside it. Charles reacted with visible frustration when summaries of the coverage reached him. The king hated seeing a procedural dispute turned into a referendum on his wife, yet he refused to blame his sister privately for the press reaction. Camilla felt the criticism more personally. She had viewed the original change as administrative, not an attempt to diminish Anne, and suggestions of deliberate disrespect left her bruised. Then the palace moved. A revised internal protocol was prepared, requiring documented approval for future precedence changes involving senior working royals. The reform effectively validated Anne's central objection without stripping Camilla of authority or publicly humiliating her. Anne responded by agreeing to attend the next official family engagement. Charles finally had a path back toward visible unity. The public had chosen its symbol, the palace had chosen its reform, and only one thing remained: whether Anne and Camilla could stand together again without pretending nothing had happened. Anne's refusal did not destroy the royal family. It forced it to correct itself. Days later, when the Princess Royal returned to official duties alongside Charles and Camilla, there was no dramatic apology and no theatrical embrace. There was something more important: a restored ceremonial order, a new approval process, and three people who understood exactly what the confrontation had cost them. The crisis ended not because anyone completely surrendered, but because each finally accepted where the boundary had to be drawn. Anne met Camilla briefly before the next formal engagement, and this time there were no aides between them. The Queen told her that the revised procedure had been approved. Anne answered with one word: good. The new protocol, a formal approval system governing major changes to royal precedence and ceremony, required significant alterations, involving senior royals to pass through proper review before receiving sovereign approval. That mattered because no single household could now quietly reshape the order on its own. Anne did not pretend the cost had been small. The Princess Royal knew staying away had wounded Charles and embarrassed Camilla before people who had expected unity. She accepted that a principled decision could still hurt those closest to her. Yet she also believed that appearing at the gala under an arrangement she considered improperly approved would have sent another message: that rules could be ignored whenever preserving appearances became more convenient than defending them. Camilla also emerged changed by the confrontation. The Queen accepted that authority did not mean freedom from safeguards. Her position beside the king remained secure, and her ceremonial role was not diminished, but she understood why predictable rules protected her as much as they protected Anne. Without those boundaries, Every adjustment could be interpreted as favoritism, rivalry, or personal ambition. Charles finally saw the same truth from another angle. The monarch recognized that his attempt to preserve harmony had allowed resentment to harden, because he had avoided making a difficult decision early enough. Anne returned to the royal calendar without demanding victory. Camilla continued her duties without losing status. Charles restored the line between personal authority and institutional procedure. No one was publicly destroyed, because destruction had never been the point. Anne's empty chair became powerful for a different reason. It represented the uncomfortable difference between loyalty to a person and loyalty to an institution. She refused one evening, not because she wanted to abandon the crown, but because she believed protecting its rules mattered more than protecting appearances. There was nothing left to threaten, expose, or postpone. Anne returned. Camilla remained queen. Charles restored the boundary between personal authority and royal procedure. And the monarchy moved forward with a painful lesson now written into the way it governed itself. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.